You're listening to A Creative Excuse, presented by Echo Amano. This episode is Jamison Chās Banks. We did this episode back in early May, and God, it feels like lifetimes since then. Anyway, hope you enjoy this episode. We had some audio issues, and so the quality isn't super great, and then it actually cuts off early at the end of the episode, so it'll feel a little abrupt. We had some internet stuff. So anyway, thanks for listening, and come on by the gallery. We're open now, Wednesday through Sunday, 10 to 5. Yeah, thanks.
Are you there?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
All right, I got it going now.
Cool.
How's your day going?
Oh, pretty good. It's a little unconventional, but I'm a bit tired and my allergies are flaring up. They've been flaring up for like the past 2 weeks for some reason. I've never really had them this bad.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I don't know what
it seems like for some people it takes a few years to activate or something.
Well, I've lived here for going on more than 20 years, and
Yeah.
I used to work outside before I became a professor, and it would get bad in February, but it seemed like it would just be about a month. But this year is exceptional. It's lasted a while.
Maybe it's all that time indoors.
Could be. Probably has something to do with it for sure. I do a bit of gardening myself, so when I'm not in front of the screen, I'm pretty much outside getting sun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, cool. Thank you so much for doing this. This is
Of course. Yeah, it's my pleasure.
It's been, it's funny, like the podcast is called A Creative Excuse because, I use it as an excuse to have conversations with people that I don't usually make the time to sit down and like just hang out and have a conversation for an hour. And it's becoming an excuse to talk to people like across the country now too. So like, it's kind of fun to be able to do that. Because I typically like to do these in person, but yeah, so it's an excuse to talk to people all over the place.
Fair enough. Why not?
Yeah. So how's your world looking these days? How has it changed? Are you doing more work in the studio? Are you doing online teaching? What's your world looking like?
Yeah, all of my teaching has pretty much gone to online, so it's been a real challenge, I'll be honest with you. It was real abrupt having to leave the school as we did. I don't think anyone was quite prepared that we'd be in this kind of state so quickly and so kind of thoroughly and so for so long. I remember when we first started talking about moving into different phases at the school, people just spoke about it in passing as if it was, just something that might happen, and it was really not taken too seriously. So I as well didn't put a whole lot of stock into it. And then, as I say, it just happened so abruptly. Like one day we were there, and then the decision was made to leave. It was kind of the only thing I can kind of akin it to is like Chernobyl on a national level, because I did end up going back to the school with permission to get a few things for classes. And, it reminded me of kind of like that, dust was accumulating and no one was there to kind of wipe it away. So it had a lot of similarities. Of course, it wasn't, as immediately catastrophic, but it's developing into something quite catastrophic, it seems. It's hard to not be, think draconianly about it, because it does kind of like you think back to when humanity's dealt with plagues in the past, and it's not easy chapters to read.
Right.
Right. So it's hard to, I'm a very optimistic person, but I'm also pragmatic, and it's hard to know what to think right now, I think is my kind of common assumption right now.
Yeah, I mean, uncertainty kind of seems to be the name of the game right now. It's like what this virus is, what it's, how effectively it's transmitting, the changes that are happening in society and will happen afterwards, when we can, do some of the things that we could do before. I mean, it's all so uncertain, and I think that, it brings up a lot of fears to wrestle with, about about a lot of things. I mean, it brings up a lot of fear, and then it also, I think, brings out a lot of opportunities to kind of, I don't know, check assumptions and kind of look at, how are we spending our time,
Mm.
those kinds of things.
Yeah, no, I agree precisely. I think that's the type of discussions we get into oftentimes in these online classes. It's a weird new reality because I'm not an online teacher, but I've become one,
Yeah.
and it's great to be able to connect, but it's also hard to not be able to connect.
Hmm.
To be able to have those interactions, and then I'm primarily a studio arts instructor, so a lot of the things that we uh, it's just nuanced, I guess. There's so much nuance, and there's so much things that are unspoken. It's like, I oftentimes will use the metaphor of the dance in the studio, in that when you come into the studio, oftentimes people that have no experience are kind of oftentimes fumbling over their own feet, or you know in a matter of words. And then after a while, they stop thinking so much about that fumbling or how pretty they're looking, and um, the eloquence or the dance starts to kind of come through, and you start to not think so much about the dance, and it just happens. And so, I've had to start thinking about those types of terms. Uh, how can I see these subtle nuances that I would normally pick up on, that it's harder in this two-dimensional kind of flat world.
Yeah. And studio arts is such, of course, a hands-on endeavor, and yeah, I can't imagine how that would work. It's been a while since I've, been in art classes, but I mean, you're working on things, and the instructor is walking around, going from place to place, spending time with students. I mean, it's a very um, four-dimensional kind of process,
It
so to
is.
translate that into a screen time that sounds really challenging.
It really is. I don't know how we're going to move forward exactly, but we're definitely coming up with ways when we have these committee meetings. But it's just like every other institution around the country or world, for that matter, that's having to deal with these. So it's good to hear what other people are doing, but I think we're all still kind of uh, wondering when the other card's going to fall.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. What a trip.
Yeah,
Um,
totally.
yeah. So, as far as you personally, you grew up in Oklahoma, Kansas?
Right on the border there in
Yeah.
Kansas. So, Oklahoma as well, in a sense.
Did you know I was born in Ponca City?
You told me that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I remembered.
Yeah,
I
cool.
remember little subtle nuanced things like that for some reason.
And did you grow up around artists? When did that kind of enter your picture?
Well, my maternal grandfather was an artist and had
Mm.
always been an artist. Actually, the piece I did for Site Santa Fe, the biennial in 2014, was about kind of his experience as an athlete, because I was just trying to honor that whole kind of memory of art, and memory of how this, back to your question, how this all kind of started. And it was with him. He had his own studio. He lived in Texas. He grew up in the town I grew up in, but he moved on out, kind of like I have done as well. But he went to Texas, and he was a machinist. He was a laborer, so he never really kind of garnished any commercial success or even notoriety, for that matter. But he did have a studio, and he did show from time to time at different local things, and he was content with that. He didn't have a really high driven ego to be sustained in that way.
What did he make?
He sculpted, but he primarily painted with oils. And Yeah, so I just grew up in in that kind of arena in a sense. And his daughter, my mother, also was an artist, but she was more of a graphic artist. And so she kind of met some kind of commercial success when she was younger, doing things for magazines, back when, artists could get work doing those types of things. So I grew up around, her doing that too. So I had, the fine art field from my grandfather, and then the commercial art field, graphic, from my mother. And so a lot of the kind of aesthetic that I have now was really gained from those early glimpses into those worlds.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it seems like you use a lot of, iconography from advertising or pop culture or propaganda, and like that seems to really be a kind of visual vocabulary that you work through.
Yeah, I've always been drawn to that for some reason. I don't know if it's the power of persuasion through marketing, or that language that we use so much in this country. And then on top of that, my father was in the Vietnam War, and was really affected by that experience. And so that plays into my work quite a bit. Uh, all that type of political rhetoric and also tension.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, a lot of especially some of the video work that I've seen of yours kind of brings war into this, like the central subject matter. I mean, does it seem like, is it what is it? Is it purely a critique? Or is it kind of like where does it come from? Looking at your dad's experience with war, how do you relate to it?
Yeah, I think it's not just his experience, because a lot of men in my family have partaken in that type
Mhm.
of reality or masculine kind of overture, and there's just something there. I think, especially even as a native man, war is such a kind of an indicator of this character that is presumed or something. So it's also kind of like deconstructing the notions of what conflict is, and then also how it is uh, sensationalized, um, and how we kind of become uh, desensitized to that rhetoric, and we kind of partake in it on some level. It's a weird thing, and
Mhm.
my work is actually not so much dealing with that anymore, because I feel like on some level I've kind of reached a point where the conversation doesn't really progress, just as war doesn't really progress. I mean,
Mhm.
it does technically, but it's still this same kind of benign act. And at some point, I'm hoping that we will evolve past that. But right now, it seems to be a compelling kind of thing that keeps technology and money and interest interested.
Yeah, and it's usually, I mean, the reasons around it are usually twisted. Like the public reasons or the reasons that are presented as like, this is why we're going to war, is usually very different than what's going on in the background.
Yeah, it's
Um,
so complex. I mean,
yeah,
that's just what's so interesting about it, and how we can be so, compelled to do one thing or another based on lines that we've been born into.
yeah.
It's a weird thing. So many different angles of complexity that I constantly would kind of wrestle with.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah.
So that's not really something that you're exploring so much in your work.
I think it's always there, kind of in the background, but yeah, I'm moving into different things that I kind of don't quite understand completely, but I'm just kind of moving through them, and I think it has, it's reflective of like the time that I'm in right now.
Yeah, right. The work that I saw at the store exhibition, like it seemed like it had a lot with like memory, but also like pop culture, but like how like we exist within that, and like the memories that kind of form and maybe are mediated by pop culture in some way.
Yeah, I mean, pop culture's there, but it's like it's like in a movie. Pop culture's in the movie, but it's
Mhm.
not the focus.
Yeah.
It's like a co-star. They're supporting cast. Uh, Really, my objective for that one was to create a sense of community, because see, my wife grew up here, and that's something that's a rarity. Uh, and so she remembers a time when downtown was more of a community and not a kind of capitalist enterprise. So that was just a record, if you will, or a diary entry in Santa Fe's past. And speaking of that one, she actually just mentioned it a couple of weeks ago, that she had really thought about the store, and how um, it has a lot more residents now that we're all like stuck in here, and that stores become a kind of point of contention now, or frustration and uh, anxiety. So it was, going back to the original idea, it was a place that you could, you know, disarm yourself and, you know, get a get something to eat, or some sort of sustenance that could provide fuel for the day. You know.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, I've always kind of wanted that to be a part of what I'm doing on Canyon, to have it be a place where I think I can do a lot better in terms of inviting that in. But um, I think it's always been something for me around like how to balance, the need to create a paycheck with something that's more spiritually nourishing. How to create a community within something that is kind of like has commerce going on, um, but that's something that's always been the case, for
Right.
human history. It's like community and commerce have always gone together.
Right. Well, for me, it's like, and I applaud you for doing what you do, because I think you stand alone in that there's certain sensibilities that you have that other businesses may not have.
Mm.
And I may be projecting there, but I just want to applaud you for what you do. But it's like, you know, yeah, that's the crux, is trying to create a general store. And maybe it's my kind of pragmatic Midwesternness that I do kind of desire a simpler time. And not that I'm wanting to go back to the Stone Age or anything like that, but it's I'm a simpleton in a sense, I guess, and I just see things not so black and white, but you know, I see like even the distancing that we are experiencing now by having to kind of communicate this way. It's a community, but it's not the one that we were designed for.
Yeah.
And so that's what I guess I'm just always trying to kind of like figure out, is what works best for our design, or this evolving design, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. I know for me and for a lot of my peers, what this brings up is kind of a longing for that. It's like when when something is taken away, um, a lot of times for me, I recognize, oh wow, I really took some of those things for granted. um, I'm really desiring that now, to have opportunities to be with a small group of people and just shoot the shit, and hang out. It's for me, it's like who knows, but I think once I'm able to kind of get back into that, I would hope that I would hold a little bit more gratitude and appreciation for those kinds of experiences that can be kind of easy to take for granted when they're just always there.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's like you say, the demand of making a paycheck, that's always kind of there. And it's like, it's it doesn't rest,
Mhm. Mhm.
so it's kind of like, okay, well, back to business,
Uh-huh.
and
Uh-huh.
that diminishes part of that energy, or that spirit of connectivity.
Mhm.
So they're
Mhm.
like a little bit like oil and water, not that they can't exist together, but they create friction.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's, back to what we were saying, it's the kind of like the grand dilemma of business, or um, commerce.
Yeah. It's like you wanna make a nice vinaigrette. You know, you have your vinegar and you have your oil, and if they sit, they separate, and you gotta shake it up, right? It's like you
Right.
gotta like for me, it's like I really need to kind of constantly keep it in motion and consider like because I feel like if I don't really think about it, I get into like, okay, how can I like, it's a slow month. Okay, I got to do a little bit more advertising this month, and so I can sell a little bit more and that
I
kind of thing. It's like,
bet.
but then it's like, okay, well, hold on a second. Like, why am I doing this again?
Right.
Why am I doing this again? And this time for me has that question is coming up a lot because money is a factor right now. It's like, okay, how do I pay for shit
Totally.
when I'm
No, I
closed,
get it.
you know? And so, but it's bringing up for me like, okay, well, I'm also like living with a lot less right now. It's like, oh, okay, do I really need those things that I thought I did before? Um, and so again, coming back to like work and like, okay, well, am I doing this just so I can make money to buy stuff I don't need?
Mm,
Well, I don't want it to be that. So what can I do to, make it more about things that are, truly nourishing, and of course one of those things is getting a paycheck so I can, have a home and eat food and et cetera,
sure.
and do fun things. So yeah, it's those two things I think in my experience have to be kind of constantly in conversation and motion in
Right.
order for them to coexist. um, yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, I know for me personally there's been a lot of really good contemplations that are coming out of having to isolate. I mean, part of that is because I don't have to worry about losing my home or you know getting food. It's I'm relatively privileged in that sense, so I can think about, you know, how how can I benefit? From this.
Sure. No,
But
no, I get it.
yeah, yeah. Um, and then, so when did you start making things? When did you start making artworks?
Before I have memory.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. It's it's ingrained.
Hmm.
It wasn't a choice. It's a curse. And yeah, I mean it's a one-way street, you know. I mean I've tried to do other things and I just I don't have the capacity for other things that I have for art
Hmm.
making.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, I remember making a finger painting in kindergarten, and it's almost like I remember the memory of it being up on the wall more than I remember making it.
Huh.
I vaguely think I remember my fingers doing the painting on it, and I remember it was a finger painting. But it's kind of like I don't oftentimes remember the memory of something. I'll remember the photograph
Yeah.
of that memory more. Uh,
Totally.
so it's the same kind of memory. I just remember a lot of drawings. I had like grocery paper bags full of drawings that I would just keep stuff in. And my son has it too. So we have years and years of collections of works of all of ours.
He's got the curse.
He's got the curse. It runs genetically. I mean, it's in a line.
Yeah. Yeah. That's
And
funny.
my wife, her family are artisans as well.
Okay.
Her last name is Mieta, and Mieta was uh, she's half Spanish and half uh, native, Navajo and Pueblo. But Mieta was the first cartographer of New Mexico,
Hmm.
and he made altar screens and all this stuff. So there's a line of artists from him through her family as well. So he got it from both sides.
Yeah, that's cool.
It is cool.
Yeah. And when did you get introduced to screen printing?
Actually, in the 90s, I came out here to go to school I was on college at Santa Fe campus, and I was taught by Melanie Yazzie screen printing in the barracks. over there.
Hmm.
And then after graduate, see, because I was only an associate degree program then, so after a couple of years, I graduated and moved to Seattle and worked for a number of artists up in Seattle, just creating work and making money and figuring out different things that I could do and new techniques. So I
Hmm.
really learned a lot up there industrially.
Uh-huh. Were you in school at the same time as Danny McCoy?
Yeah, me and Dan are actually really good friends.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
That's cool. Yeah, I remember him talking about going to school at that time and kind of how he got into. Were you doing sign painting as well?
I actually worked at a sign shop in Seattle for a while.
Uh-huh.
And yeah, that was so. Yeah, I mean, we have a lot of the same background. We're from the same region,
Hmm.
civilized tribes, um, had lived in industrial areas and did sign painting, worked in a lot of different skill sets, but at different times,
Yeah.
but same things.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
So it sounds like, I mean, so like there's also that thread of advertising in a way. I don't know, the medium kind of informs a lot of the content too, right? Like, I mean, screen printing, because of, its ability to reproduce, has been, used in advertising and things like that. So there's almost kind of this like real direct relationship between the two.
Yeah, I mean, and I honestly, I used to print boxes for certain companies like Microsoft and what have you in certain capacities as well. So I almost liked printing the boxes more than I liked reproducing art.
Hmm.
Uh, so that's just a personal kind of preference.
Yeah. And you made some of those in the store. Was they soap boxes?
Uh, they were little fishing. Uh, what are the reels? Like the fishing reels.
Okay.
Um,
Don't quite remember.
I had so much stuff in there. You're probably right. I may have had some soapbox. I'm on a
Maybe it's
soapbox all the time.
yeah, that's cool. So do you stick pretty much with screen printing these days, or are you doing other media as well?
No, I haven't done any of that this whole semester,
Okay.
really. Sometimes I just kind of get burnt out on it. And right now, I'm just working in the house. I don't have a studio right now. I was at Vital Spaces. But when I got hired on to be a full-time instructor at IA, I just really had no time. It's been a challenge to find time um, for my own work, especially
Hmm.
with the new kind of uh, ways of learning and teaching.
Yeah.
So I'm actually doing a couple of projects with my students, just to kind of let them know, hey, this is how you can do it,
Hmm.
um, and then yeah, so it's just kind of like follow the leader kind of thing.
Yeah. Do you find that teaching informs your work in some way? Do you like that kind of, do you feel like that through instructing, which I know it's not as straightforward as just like, here is some knowledge, go. But just, I mean, I know it's always about that kind of relationship. Do you find that changes the way you think about your own work and process?
Yeah, absolutely. Because I don't know if you remember, but the store was a collaboration with one of my students.
That's right. Yeah.
So I'm oftentimes inspired by my students, well, very much so, and they teach me things, and I'm more than open to learning from them. It's not a one-way street; it's a
Hmm.
symbiotic relationship for sure. And I hope to impart on them a little bit of my own practice, and because I remember other people doing that for me, and it was so inspirational and just so needed.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Hmm. So you moved out to Santa Fe in the '90s, did some work at IIA, went back to Seattle, went up to Seattle. What happened then?
I actually worked for Del Chihuly for just a really short time. Like I had stars in my eyes and shot for them, and so worked there for a little while. But my car broke down while I was living there. I was, totally broke and young, and his studio was way up in Ballard. I lived in the south of the city, and taking a bus would have taken 2 hours just to get one way. So I had to let that go, and I ended up working for a surplus store for a while, and then got a job working for a sign company that also did work for artists. It was a weird kind of mix,
Uh-huh.
because there was a lot of artists that worked there, and then a lot of kind of people who were hard edge industrial kind of laborers.
Yeah.
So that was really cool because we would go to different sites and almost make like installations. Oh, and actually, before I worked there, I did uh, windows at Nordstrom's.
Uh-huh.
So advertising, painting, creating on-site installations. I was kind of doing that in jobs.
Right. Right.
So I think a lot of that really taught me more than I learned at art school. Of like, and right then, art was really changing. This was like at the turn of the century. Sounds funny to say that, but
Uh-huh.
it was at the turn of the century, and art was really kind of changing from it being relatively tame, in my opinion. And I'm again projecting, but it was just my kind of point of view, because when the internet kind of really took off, things just took off in the art world, in the business world, and it changed phenomenally. Like within 10 years, the art world was no longer having these parameters at
Yeah.
all. Um, so that was a really exciting time to be there and to kind of be young. And Seattle was I was going to different shows every night, and being an artist and a screen printer, all those bands wanted merchandise, so I couldn't even create stuff fast enough to get free tickets to shows and
Mm-hmm.
free beer and free food. So it was perfect. It was a perfect thing for me to fall into.
Yeah.
And then I got burnt out on that, and then the whole time, I had met my wife now when we were younger at the College of Santa Fe. But circumstances were different, and I had never forgotten about her, and so I moved back down here and found her, and we started a life together.
What years were you in Seattle?
I was there from 99 to I think the beginning of 2004 into
Okay.
2003.
Yeah, we were I spent some early years there. I was there like 87 and 95, and then I spent about 8 months there in 2001. So we were there at the same time.
Yeah, totally. Where were
Yeah.
you living?
Tequila, just by Renton.
I know that. Yep.
Yeah,
Just outside of the city.
yeah, yeah. It
Very
was
cool.
cheap. It was cheap.
Very cool. No, it's all, those suburbs are all really cool. I oftentimes thought to myself, if I ever retire and have money, I'd like to retire to one of those islands up there.
Totally. Oh my God.
Just be all isolated and zenned out.
Yeah, when I there a few years ago, there was a couple years in a row where I took kind of just personal weeks and just went up and hung out on Orcas Island and hiked and sat by the water. It's such a great place to recharge, especially from the desert.
That's all you need to do.
Yeah, yeah.
Awesome. That makes me miss it even more now.
I know, it's so beautiful.
It
And now
is.
they're starting to get into some of the better days, the kind of May, June, July sunnier days.
Yeah, it's funny because I think about that. I'm like, oh, let's just go. And then
Yeah,
I'm like,
right.
oh, wait a minute.
Yeah, man. And then, so moving back to Santa Fe, did you? What was the impulse that brought you back?
My wife.
Oh, what? So okay, great.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That was the major impulse for
Did
sure.
you reconnect with her before that? Were you like, hey, I haven't forgot about you. What are you doing? What was that? What was that like?
Awkward.
Yeah,
Awkward for sure. But I thought, what the hell?
uh-huh.
I've already relocated, and I have to do this. This
Yeah.
is what it's all about. And so, um, yeah, it was a match. It was a match made in heaven. I'm so very fortunate.
That's so cool.
Yeah,
So cool. And you have a son?
we have a son. Yeah, he's
Yeah,
10 years old now,
he's
and
10.
we have a house down in the south of Santa Fe, and
Hmm.
we have had that for like 12 or 13 years now.
Yeah.
Time's just flying by.
Yeah. Yeah. For real. For real. Cool. So you're working on a few projects with students right now.
Yeah. So I'm teaching painting,
Mm-hmm.
which is a really weird kind of fit because I'm not really known to be a painter. I have painted in the past, but there is so many excellent painters within our arena. So I'm doing the best I can.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, so I'm just doing the final project with them. And the final project really is just to kind of create something that either confronts this situation or escapes it and helps you to kind of remain sane.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that objective is being met because when I meet with the students, we kind of have a little bit of a time where we talk about things and then we talk about how their work's going. And so then, oftentimes I won't really share my own work unless I feel like there's enough time. Um, but I like to be able to let them know what I'm doing. And the paintings that I'm doing right now are really just bold fields of color. They're shapes of color, and they're really kind of inspired by a number of different things. They're inspired by Oscar Howe's work, uh, and he used kind of triangles of color in different ways and different shapes.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what I'm trying to kind of work with is different block forms that the shapes themselves create the depth. And I find that just very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I've been thinking more about Taryn's work as well. Taryn, is one of my students. And
Yeah.
um, so it's influenced from a number of different things, and it's not just kind of stagnant in just one thing, but it's looking more at kind of nativeness, color theory. Um, yeah, yeah, but also structure. I had been thinking about these the satellite that was sent to the moon by the Soviets, and it looks like a little silver soccer ball.
Hmm.
And when it crashed into the moon, it like exploded. It was designed to explode. So the first thing we sent to the moon exploded. But it had all these kind of like Cyrillic Soviet iconography all over it.
Mm-hmm.
But that structure is something that's really kind of interesting to me. And it's also, yeah, I think it's subconsciously like the viral kind of structures.
Mm-hmm.
These, they could be really, really big, like crystalline structures, or they could be like super, super small, microscopic stuff, and they still have the same kind of properties and uh, structures.
Yeah. Although Taryn's new work is all spherical or circular.
Yeah, I've noticed that.
The bags, yeah,
Right.
yeah. So that's
The
kind of
bags.
interesting. Yeah. Have you seen the bags?
I have.
Yeah, yeah.
Yep. I remember some of the very first ones that he did in class. So I remember the whole evolutionary stages of it. It's been cool to see.
Yeah. I mean, they definitely feel kind of cosmic, kind of planetary. A lot of them have that kind of like feel very spacey.
Well, and I think also, and I've told him this, that they're important. You know, they're a part of this legacy um, that is very, very cool to be, have that responsibility.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. So, what's next? I mean, it sounds like it's still pretty uncertain with school, and I guess you're coming up on summer. Were you scheduled to teach during the summer?
No, I have taught in the summer, but I don't think we're going to have classes this summer.
Yeah.
I haven't heard anything. That could change, of course, but I am slotted to teach at least the next year
Mm-hmm.
in the same capacity that I have been teaching.
Yeah.
So that's good. Um,
And is that all
and I
one-on-one, pretty much?
no, they're Zoom classes. So
Okay.
like Monday and Wednesdays, I have writing about art, and that's a writing class,
Mm-hmm.
and I have like 18 students. So that's a pretty big
Wow.
screen of Hollywood squares.
Yeah.
And it's hard to manage everybody in the way that I normally would, because a lot of times I can go and just spend some time one-on-one with students in the classroom, just kind of, rotate around, orbit around. But this way, it's really very hard. We can go into breakout rooms, but I find that people aren't as open to communicate over this,
Yeah.
for whatever reasons, whether it's stress from the time or what have you.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow.
But yeah,
Yeah. What a trip.
but like art wise, I don't have any shows lined up or anything like that. So I'm just, it's not distressing, um, because a lot of people have had their whole kind of worlds upset by this whole thing. I'm like yourself. I'm just kind of retooling, and I really am appreciating the time with my family and this time to kind of reset. I have not a whole lot of disagreements with it. I mean, I'd like to go out and just do whatever I want from time to time and go get, something to eat, or, have a little bit of an extravagant life on some level. But, I think to people who have sacrificed things in the past, going back to perhaps war, I think about World War II, because I look often to my grandparents and how they operated in their lives, and I really admire the way they held themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And they lived through that. And I remember doing work about it and talking to them about it, and they had such a resolute kind of behavior or optimism. So that's how I kind of feel. And I mean, this is kind of a personal note, but I haven't been affected too much by the virus itself, except for today. My wife's sister, who works in the medical field, is developing symptoms that are close to that. So we're kind of on edge
Yeah.
a little bit on that today, because we're worried,
Mm-hmm.
but we're staying optimistic, and yeah. So
Yeah.
that's kind of, my world has condensed, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm okay with that.
Yeah. Yeah. Me too. And yet at the same time, it's like, it's crazy to think about how global the phenomena is. Um, it's affecting pretty much everybody.
Hmm.
Um, unless maybe you're in a very isolated community. I mean, the whole world is working with it in some way.
Yeah.
And it's so interesting to think about how that shifts the global consciousness. I mean, we'll see, but like, it's undoubtedly transforming things, people,
For sure. Yeah.
situations, governments, societies, cultures. Um, and it's like, it feels, it's big. It's just so much bigger than we can kind of really comprehend. Um, so that's like both kind of exciting and scary, and like, what does it mean? What's it doing?
Yeah. Yeah, it's like my son, he asked me, he's like, are we going to start, do you think we're going to have fifth grade? And I said, well, I don't know. Nobody really knows what's going to happen, but that's not reason to be, upset. These are just changes that happen in life, and we have to adapt. Um, it's not like I was saying, like in World War II, where people were really being affected by things. I myself haven't been affected personally, and I haven't really heard too much about people, because my world is condensed a little bit. I have students that are on reservations, and they're certainly been affected more than if they were here or other places. So that's a bit alarming, but I think about the sacrifice that I'm having to do, and it's not much.
Yeah.
It really isn't. It's minuscule for me to have to stay at home and operate this way.
Yeah.
Whereas, like I say, like people like my sister-in-law who have to go and, you know, directly confront this thing like all day, man, I can't even imagine the type of anxieties and sacrifice that's being asked of those people.
Yeah, for real. Yeah. It's big. It's big.
Yeah. Yep. So I'm thankful, very
Mm-hmm.
thankful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I think that's all I got.
Well, I hope it was what you wanted.
I try to stay I don't try to create any expectations of this other than to have a conversation, you know. I try to select people that, are involved in creative practice in some degree or another, and then just let it go from there. I think you might have just frozen. It's a funny place to end.
Come here, deixa